9 signs of a bad wheel bearing and how to spot it early. At first, it's just a small sound, a faint hum, something you barely notice. Then it gets louder, a steady noise that follows your speed. And slowly, you start to realize something in the wheel area is not right. That is how a bad wheel bearing usually begins. Not with a sudden failure, but with small, easy-to-ignore signs that get worse over time. And the reason this matters is simple. Wheel bearings are critical. They allow your wheels to rotate smoothly with minimal friction. And when they start to fail, they don't just make noise. They affect stability. They affect control. And in severe cases, they can even become a safety issue. In this video, I'll show you 9 common signs of a bad wheel bearing. And more importantly, how to recognize the problem early before it turns into a bigger repair. Let's go step by step. Sign number 1. Humming or growling noise that increases with speed. This is the most common symptom. A bad wheel bearing often produces a humming, growling, or rumbling sound. And the key detail is this. The sound increases with vehicle speed, not engine RPM. At low speeds, you may barely hear it. At higher speeds, it becomes louder and more constant. This happens because the bearing is under more load and spinning faster. That speed-related noise pattern is one of the strongest clues that you are dealing with a wheel bearing. Sign number 2. Noise changes when turning. This is one of the best diagnostic clues. When you turn, weight shifts from one side of the vehicle to the other. If the noise gets louder when turning one direction and quieter when turning the other, it usually points to the bearing on the loaded side. For example, turn left. Noise gets louder. That often means the right side bearing is worn. Because it is now under more pressure, this side-to-side change is one of the clearest ways to separate a bearing issue from tire noise. Sign number 3. Vibration in the steering wheel or entire vehicle. As the bearing wears out, it no longer rotates smoothly. This creates vibration. At first, it may be subtle, a slight buzz in the steering wheel, or a faint vibration in the seat or floor, but over time, it becomes more noticeable. And this is where confusion happens, because this vibration can feel similar to tire imbalance, but when vibration appears together with a speed-related humming noise, the bearing becomes much more likely. Sign number 4. Loose or unstable steering feel. A healthy wheel bearing keeps the wheel tightly in place, but when it wears out, it can develop play. That means slight movement where there should be none. You may feel this as looseness in the steering, lack of precision, or a feeling that the front end is not fully stable. This is more noticeable at higher speeds or during lane changes. And this is where the issue starts becoming more serious, because steering stability is directly affected. Sign number 5. Uneven or unusual tire wear. A worn bearing can slightly change how the wheel rotates and sits, and over time, that can affect tire wear. You may notice uneven patterns, edge wear, or patches that don't match normal driving. Now, tire wear alone does not prove a bad bearing, but when it appears together with noise, vibration, and instability, it becomes part of a bigger picture. Sign number 6. A BS warning light. On many modern vehicles, the wheel speed sensor is built into the wheel hub. That means it works closely with the bearing. If the bearing wears out or develops play, it can affect the sensor signal. And when the signal becomes unstable, the ABS system may trigger a warning light. This is one of the more surprising symptoms, because most drivers do not connect ABS warnings with wheel bearings. But it can happen, especially in later stages of wear. Sign number 7. Grinding noise in advanced stages. When the bearing gets severely worn, the internal components start to break down, and instead of a smooth hum, you may hear grinding. This is a serious warning, because it means metal parts are wearing directly against each other. At this stage, the problem is no longer minor, and the risk increases quickly, because a failing bearing can eventually seize or break apart. Sign number 8. Heat coming from the wheel area. A damaged bearing creates more friction, and more friction creates more heat. You may not always see it directly, but after driving, one wheel may feel noticeably hotter than the others. Sometimes this is detected during inspection. Other times it shows up as a burning smell near the wheel. This is not always the first sign, but when it appears, it confirms that something is no longer rotating normally. Sign number 9. Noise that gets worse over time. This may sound simple, but it is one of the most important clues. Wheel bearing problems rarely stay the same. They almost always get worse gradually. The noise becomes louder, the vibration becomes stronger, the instability becomes more noticeable. This gradual progression is a key characteristic because many other issues like tire problems may stay consistent, but a failing bearing almost always gets worse. Now here is something very important. How do you spot a bad wheel bearing early? Start with the pattern. Ask yourself, does the noise increase with speed? Does it change when turning? Is there vibration? Does the steering feel stable? Is the problem getting worse over time? These questions matter because they help narrow down the cause before replacing parts blindly. Also think about recent events. Did you hit a pothole, drive on rough roads, or notice the problem starting suddenly after an impact? Because impacts can damage bearings or accelerate wear. And if you are unsure, a proper inspection is always best. Checking for wheel play, listening for noise, or using diagnostic tools can confirm the issue, so let's quickly recap. A bad wheel bearing may cause humming or growling noise, noise that changes when turning, vibration, loose steering feel, uneven tire wear, ABS warning light, grinding noise, excess heat at the wheel, and symptoms that get worse over time. Some of these signs start small, some grow slowly, and some only appear when the problem becomes serious. That is why early detection matters, because fixing a bearing early is much easier than dealing with a failure later. And now I want to hear from you. What was the first sign you noticed? Was it the sound, the vibration, or something else? Comment below with your experience. And if enough people mention the same issue, I'll make the next video on that exact problem.